All right, welcome to this episode of the End Code. I'm joined today by Dalen Zartman of Rescue Methods, as well as his assistant, Scott Thomas. We're going to be cutting up this car, isn't that right, Dalen?
That's right.
So we're going to be talking about EMS-driven auto extrication and all the different components that go into that. Dalen, why don't we start a little bit by kind of going over some safety concerns as we first roll up on scene, if you don't mind running us through that real quick.
You bet. So initially when everybody pulls up on scene, particularly you guys, if you're the first due, you need to have kind of an expanded perspective of the environment,
okay.
And then you need to basically contract or minimize your view so that you zone all the way down to the patient. So when we first pull up on scene, the first things we want to consider are roadway, speed of travel, time of day, and basically configuration of the road. Do you have a blind spot? Are you up and over a hill? That's all going to dictate vehicle placement. So we really want to urge EMS responders, they're the first to do on scene. The tendency is to go right to the vehicle, get as close as you possibly can. If there's going to be a delay on creating a barrier or a protection zone for the work site there, resist that temptation, pull back and park your rig so that you are giving yourself a little bit of a safe zone. When you look at the NIOSH reports and where most fatalities and injuries occur to first responders, based on auto accidents, the number one most lethal thing we face is secondary impacts from other vehicles.
Gotcha.
So be really conscientious about that. Make sure you create an appropriate barrier for the work site itself. The second caveat to that is you don't want to put yourself in such a position that you don't have access to the resources you need.
Okay.
So it's a tough juggling act initially until we get more apparatus there to help facilitate that scene and create that general environmental safety. The second phase from that big picture perspective of the scene is to narrow it in a little bit and look at immediate hazards to the vehicle and the work area. Are there any utilities involved? Do we have any lines down? Have we blown off any ground-based transformers? Could the vehicles be energized? Are they near culverts with running water? So on and so forth.
Okay.
Once you've eliminated all the hazards involved with the environment itself, we then focus in on the actual vehicle, okay? And we're going to spend a little bit of time going through the sequence for us as extrication personnel, why that's so important that we get that secured before you guys gain access to the vehicle.
Okay.
It really is imperative. It's a thing that gets bypassed a lot, especially when victim presentations present to us, I urgently need help. All of us as first responders want to jump right into that sequence. And it's always a risk-benefit analysis, but we really want to urge, it's important that we slow down, that we hit the pause button or kind of activate a yellow light and wait for this vehicle to be mitigated, managed, or monitored from a hazard perspective until we really put people into the vehicle or immediately around the vehicle where it may move, shift, energize, deploy an airbag, so on and so forth.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, let's get started then.
Great.
What do you say? All right. Okay, so first we're going to talk about safety hazards regarding an auto accident. Biggest way to help protect yourself against a safety hazard in an auto accident. First of all, wear protective gear, helmets, eyewear, coats and pants, as well as your reflective vest. Also, look at things at the car. Look at things on the car, whether it be an immediate safety hazard, electrical lines, transformers, like Dalen talked about. All those things that you can either neutralize yourself or that you can recognize and keep your crew safe from being close to. Other things you need to look at. Whether or not the car will go forward, backwards, side to side. Dalen, you can kind of talk a little bit more about what an initial engine company on scene, once they get there, things that they're going to take care of.
Okay, so there's an interface that really needs to take place and improve between technical rescue side and EMS side, and that is that the number one goal is the victim and the victim's care. The victim always has to drive the rescue. In order for us to render appropriate care and make the right decisions about extrication, our primary goal once we make the vehicle safe is to get EMS providers access to the victim to start their primary assessment. That is then going to dictate for us what the EMS provider or the medic in charge wants as far as mode of extrication as well as condition of the victim, any impingements, where the entrapments are, and how we need to take this vehicle down. So, from the starting point, when we arrive on scene, if EMS personnel have not already made access to the vehicle, meaning they've tried before they've pried, there's some doors that are accessible and open. If we have a full entrapment, we're going to start by stabilizing the vehicle, managing the hazards associated with the vehicle, and then taking a pane of glass to get EMS access. We really don't want to put EMS providers into the vehicle until we've accomplished stabilization and hazard management. So, some basic tools. As the officer, ideally, I've got a minimum of a halogen, some window and glass removal pieces, and then some type of lightweight extrication tool that is portable and independent of a power source. That allows me to accomplish all my hazard management techniques while the rest of the personnel on the rig are getting prepped and ready for stabilization. Our basic theory for stabilization with a vehicle with all 4 wheels is 4 points of contact. In our perspective, no, the wheels and tires do not suffice for stabilization. They're dependent upon suspension modes. So even if you deflate the wheels, you can still have play in up and down movement of the vehicle, as well as forward and back movement of the vehicle. So I come off the rig, I have my 2 pieces of equipment or multiple pieces of equipment. I task my helpers, the guys off the back of the rig, with taking their wedges and placing wedges underneath the vehicle. We'll talk about those as well as we progress. For me, I'm going to immediately develop a visual assessment of the victim. EMS personnel are also doing the same thing. We're focused on those primary biggies. ABCs, are they breathing? Are they not breathing? Are they actively bleeding? Do they look like they're in a status where this is a recovery or a rescue? That's where we formulate our first opinions, okay? To mitigate the energy status of this vehicle, I've got to gain access to this hood. If you have a Haugen, you create an initial purchase point, start progressing through that sequence. We always like to tack the hinges, not the latches. That allows us guaranteed access into the vehicle, exposes compressed pistons within the hood assembly to make sure that we're not going to discharge any rods or hurt anybody in that sequence, okay? So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to take my Haugen, I'm going to insert it in the back corner of the hood, and I'm going to create a quick purchase point. Once I've got that basic purchase point established, I can then use my tool to expose this hinge. Once I expose this hinge, I'm typically going to shear the majority of it out just with a little bit of a spread. If I can't complete the removal, I'm going to turn around and I'm immediately going to cut the hinge. While I'm progressing through this sequence, my stabilizing guys are attaching these wedge points outside of the extrication zone. So they're going to take these wedges, they're going to invert them, they're going to lift in the wheel well and place these underneath the A columns and C columns. Once our hood is popped, we're going to rotate it up. Then we're going to pivot the hood right and left and do a removal on that hood. Go ahead, Jeff. As soon as the battery is exposed, we're going to attack this 12-volt battery and make sure we take down the energy status on this. We're going to take the hood completely away from the sequence. We are big fans of removing the terminal connections, not cutting the cables. Especially on newer vehicles, there may be system components within the vehicle that EMS providers may want that are going to facilitate the extrication. So if we completely cut the cables, we lose the ability to come back and potentially reconnect these if we need to move the seat backwards or forwards in its electric seat, move the steering column, activate any wheelchair or special needs attachments that are in the vehicle that we haven't identified yet, so on and so forth. So pre-cutting these can kind of bite you in the rear end down the road with the extrication sequence. So be leery of these, especially as the EMS guys. If you have access to the 12 volt, you want to gain really quick access to the patient, resist the temptation to cut these, go ahead and do removals on these. So a simple pair of pliers or channel locks, anything along those lines, you're going to get on that nut and you're just going to start dialing that back. It's going to take you a little more time than a rapid cut, which if we had this patient is going to be dead in 2 minutes if we don't gain access, then we would consider or contemplate a cut on the terminals or on the cables. So now our battery is DC'd. We've got it exposed so that everybody coming in on the scene can recognize that this energy status has been mitigated. If you don't have a control strap on the battery, take the battery out of the vehicle and set it on the deck in front of the car. That makes it an even more visible component for everybody to know energy status is mitigated, helps safety officers progress from there. Okay, so everything is controlled. You can see we've got our 4 points of contact in, aft and, or behind and in front of the wheel, so we've resisted forward and backwards movement. We've also resisted up and down movement. This is now a stable and safe platform for EMS personnel to get in. So how do we gain access and where? The initial temptation is usually come up here and blow this glass. The secondary temptation is, instead of doing a hood takedown like we did, we reach into this zone and we pull the hood latch mechanism. It happens all the time. Well, it's very important that we talk about airbag zones. So there's a rule called 6-12-24. The 6-12-24 rule is, if you have side curtain or side seat impact airbags, you've got a 6-inch deployment zone for those, plus the diameter of the window opening. Your front steering wheel airbag is a 12-inch deployment, and your passenger airbag, front airbag, is a 24-inch deployment. If we reach in here and airbags aren't deployed, we open ourselves up to a significant injury factor when those aren't controlled and contained. So we really want to resist reaching through any of the airbag zones trying to gain access to components of the vehicle. The last pieces that are left to really be conscientious about is the vehicle in park, are the keys out of the ignition, and then start our assessment. I don't want to put glass all over this victim as well. Another really important consideration is that in 2017, every pane of glass on a vehicle is going to be safety laminate glass. So the ability to come up here and pop these windows by the time we get into next year is going to be non-existent. So you're going to have an aggressive window cutting tool or component just even to make these side access points. Okay?
Would you recommend that any unit that's available that may be responding first due to a wreck have any kind of like safety glass cutting apparatus, or is that something that can be more directed towards an engine company or rescue company?
Yeah, good question. For me personally, I'm a big advocate of every functional first responder having a glass cutting tool that is capable of managing and handling safety laminate glass. This is an isolated event we're talking about, which is basically extrication with entrapment. But if this was a car that was in a ravine and we had rushing water coming up into the vehicle, if we needed to get access to this patient right away, or it was more a fire hazard, wasn't going to require a lot of in-depth extrication, having the ability to get into that glass to start managing the patient immediately, to me is a life-saving capability. And if you don't have it, imagine having to go get your axes and halogans and trying to work through a windshield. It's going to be the same application with side glass.
Does just rolling down the window do an effective job of containing the glass? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can get into the door and simply roll the glass down, then you're just going to take the glass out of the equation. So when we're talking about taking glass, unless we have electric powered windows, we're always going to roll those down if we can open the doors. But in an entrapment application, we don't have the ability to open those doors, and that's where it's all going to boil down to. You better have some type of glass removal tool. This is not a newer car, and it doesn't have the safety laminate glass, so when we make access for Chelsea and our lead paramedic to get in here and start the assessment process, we want to take the adjacent rear glass.